can tell you that
I
story.
need to hear this story. How does Heidi break a window?
I'm Colin Burrows, and this is the Woodstein Media Podcast, Episode 5. This podcast is adapted from interviews conducted for articles on Wood-stein.ca, and it is produced on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe, and Odawa peoples. This episode features a conversation conducted with artist and poet Roshan James, and was originally conducted for an article entitled Roshan James Creates Art, Encouraging Re-examination of Societal Norms. During the podcast, you will hear excerpts from Warm Love, a 45-minute spoken word and ambient music mixtape Roshan has released on most streaming platforms. However, the first song kicking off this podcast is only related by the theme of the importance of art, creativity, and imagination. The song is Crazy Demons Play by ex-Chumbawamba member Danbert Nobacon, Kyra Wood Cramer, and the Axis of Dissent from the double album Mesmerica, Expect a Circus. And damn it, I think it's one of the most intellectually stimulating music releases ever. I can't recommend it enough. This podcast and Woodstein Media are independently produced journalism that you can support through Patreon or by donating through PayPal at wood-stein.ca. WOOD-STEIN.ca. Thanks for your interest and support. If you enjoy this podcast, you can support it by listening to more episodes, liking them, sharing them, subscribing, or reviewing them. Thanks.
We don't remember running round like crazy demons when we were 5 or 6 years old, without a care in the world, making up make-believe crazy batshit scenarios with our playmates, with a fire in our souls, going out on a limb, tapping into an energy that's older than history. Given half a chance, we play. Shakespeare did it as a kid, at some point carrying on, defying forces who only ever want more obedient workers, 'cause a system of government wedded to vested interests can't imagine anything else or any other way. Of all play, so we tap into an energy that's older than history. Given half a chance, we play. Going even further back, way back, into the paleological record, the story of evolving players and of the storytelling animal that's us. Pulling all kinds of crazy shit, finding out by doing it, and enjoying it, and sharing it, and pushing it, and loving it, and all the while laughing at the risk. For its own sake, 'cause it feels good, the endorphin rush, 'cause it's nature's way of sharpening our wits. By tapping into an energy that's older than history, given half a chance, we play.
the mother of invention, playing its elaborations we call art.
Imagination and creativity somewhere in Circuit City. Crazy demons wired on organic electricity, coming up with crazy ideas, stumbling upon possible solutions and testing them out, some of which just might work, and sharing the results. And if we're ever gonna save the day, we'll never ever do it without play. Play.
Well, I am interested in how you ended up out in
Out here.
Perth East, of all places.
Yes. We were trying to move out of Wellesley. I had been living in Wellesley for about 9 years, and the kids were born there. We were really entrenched in that community. And then...
So it's not that far from
No, we
where
were
you...
born in Stratford. Yeah,
Oh,
born in
okay.
Stratford and then lived in Wellesley. Yeah.
All right. So you've been in this general vicinity for a long time.
Yeah. But I am from Toronto.
Okay,
And-
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
But you moved out.
Yeah, I migrated. I kept going west.
Okay.
I followed the Pet Shop Boys, and I just kept going west. It's a very meandering story, so I'll try to keep it like brief. But so, born and raised in Scarborough. When I look back, like, the trajectory is a little bit interesting. But my parents moved us to Whitby when I was 10, so sort of split my childhood between Scarborough and then Whitby, very like totally two different places.
So I mean I see, like, you share photos, early morning photos, and of all the space and
Yeah.
everything like that. Was that something you always wanted when you were in a place like Scarborough? Like
So it was interesting because when I was in Scarborough, I was very young, but my parents took us on a lot of road trips, traveled a lot with us, and so we always really appreciated nature. Yeah, being close to nature. We did a lot of fishing when I was little, down in Virginia, like in the ocean, clam digging. And my dad could have been an artist, but he's a Burmese refugee, so he left Burma when he was 19, went to India because of all the civil unrest and civil war going on in Burma, and then India for I think maybe a couple of years, and then finally came to Canada, single. My mom came to Canada at the same time, same year, single, from India. Met here, and then in Toronto, and that's how we kind of ended up there.
If you get away from yourself, if you get turned around, look for the light in my eyes. This is my warm love to you, you wildly beautiful beast. There is nowhere you need to go to find who you are meant to be. Fold inward, pull close. The life you love is already echoing inside you.
I went to school in Kingston and absolutely hated it the first 2 years. So I went to Queens. I really struggled. I thought I was going to go into law and all that, and that's what my parents wanted me to do. So, I was creative and enjoyed art, but that was never like seen as something to do. And my parents were like, you gotta, get a really good job, and law seems like a great track for you. And I did have a lot of awesome mentors. I was really fortunate as I was growing up. So thought that was the track for me, and then quickly realized it wasn't, and found Kingston to be very, it's a big city, but it has a very small town culture and sort of mindset, and I really felt it keenly. Okay. Whereas growing up in Whitby, I hadn't felt that. Whitby felt a little more diverse and inclusive, and I never once had felt anything that made me feel uncomfortable, but Kingston was a totally different story. So I ended up leaving Queens after my second year and moved back home, transferred to York University, and something clicked at that point, and I went into the English program there and loved everything. And it wasn't even easier. It was so much more difficult when I think about it, because I was commuting from Whitby to York every day. 2.5 hour commute one way. Yeah, go train, subway, down to bus, there and back.
Take my hand, let's walk together, so we may know each other's 100 years around the sun. It must be full moon o'clock somewhere for the stones in my stars to turn. How carefully I want to hold all the possibilities, but truth and cold comfort rarely mix well. It is a dreamer's mind and a rebel's heart that always know the way. We are here to call attention to beauty, truth, and love, to revive the bohemian in all of us. I cherish the way they call me mother, as I imagine she does when we draw close to her.
It was just this dichotomy, and it's kind of followed me through my career progression, because even at Queens I started doing a double major in English and economics, which is two polar opposites, and it was very atypical at the time too. Now a little more so, there's people who kind of have these more hybrid sort of STEM or STEAM careers where there's arts and tech kind of coming together. But yeah, I'm old, so at the time it wasn't really done.
You mentioned the STEAM, which pulls in the arts. They're stuck on STEM still around here. STEAM hasn't really picked up, but I think it eventually will. Things are starting to move this way, but they take time.
It takes time, and it's a generational thing too. So I think the first time I came across the STEAM acronym was when I was volunteering with Women Empowering Technology in Kitchener-Waterloo, and it was a group of women who had, there was chapters across the country, it was a large organization, and it was all about elevating sort of the profile of women in all sorts of STEAM careers, and they very much saw the alignment between arts and technology, and so it was always a STEAM reference as opposed to STEM, which was cool. Yeah, when I encountered that group and started working with them, that was around 2013-ish. There was a lot happening in the community in Kitchener-Waterloo at the time around Communitech and the Accelerator Center, and a lot of crossover between arts and culture and those other sectors, and it was just fascinating to me.
Privilege. For a big town, it was small thinking, small people and small ideas and small boxes. Although smiling, they would walk close together in packs. It was the smallness that felt overwhelming. I couldn't find myself in it, except at night, when they warned you not to walk by certain parks alone, when they talked about women going missing or being pulled between the trees, as if it was us who were at fault for passing by after last call. I felt condescension radiating from cold stone buildings, revered for architecture and geology and languages. I have never wanted to leave a place more than this. I wrote my name on my arm after it was given to me. The angel kind have a way of taming their own.
Your poetry. So how long have you been doing that? Did that come out of your move towards English in school?
I would say, so I wrote poetry before going to university. It was just something I would always do. Like I would just write down little verses, like in my journals and things like that. But I remember very keenly like sitting down and working on pieces. Like it was just something that I wanted to do. I always like made little books and created things, like from when I was like tiny, because I remember taking little books that I had made into like my kindergarten class, and my dad, basically like tiny chapbooks. And my dad helped me find them, and it was just a lot of fun. I always loved doing stuff like that. But yeah, I never saw it as something like to do. And even when I was in university, like I was more so thinking I would go into like research and, you know, learning about and writing about different historical figures, and I was very focused on early modern, that time period, so Renaissance, but broader than the Renaissance too. So kind of like Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare, a little bit before that too, so even dipping into like Francis Bacon. And I loved studying the literature and the history at the same time, and ended up being a research assistant on a volunteer basis in my undergrad for one of my professors, and then was her formal RA for when I started my master's. And then I did 1 year of a master's, split that between York and U of T, spent a lot of time at the Center for Medieval Studies at U of T, which was such a trip because like you really like get serious at that point. So I was studying medieval philosophy, looking at original texts. There's the Rare Books Library in Toronto, and it's so cool. Like you walk in and your jaw just like hits the floor because it's like stories and stories of books, and you can just see them all, but you're just in this one little like area because you're not really allowed to like touch anything. You can request to have certain pieces pulled out of the archives and then opened up, and you can look at
Do you
them.
have to wear like...
I think the professor was wearing gloves because I think there were certain pieces like we couldn't even touch, but then there were some that we could, or they were like copies that were like still hand copied, so not like replicas, but still from the time period, but not maybe as like precious as like the first wasn't like the first folio or anything like that. I still didn't feel like I fit though, and I feel like that was always sort of dogging me. Like I was interested in things and put myself toward things, but then I'd be like, oh, this doesn't quite feel like a fit, so I'd pivot. I was doing that enough that I was like, oh, I feel like I'm disappointing people. I look like I'm a little bit scattered, so I was sort of had that feeling. Yeah, so I kept casting around for things that helped me feel like more connected and successful. And the most gratifying thing at that time ended up being business, because it's so immediately, you do work, you get a paycheck type of thing. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take a break from the master's. I always was able to sort of like figure out how to show up as being kind of successful or having it all together, but like the internals were like very much like, this doesn't feel right, or like I should be doing something else, or I'm disappointing somebody somewhere at any given point in time.
Her wholeness wasn't something that could be caught on camera. It would take a lifetime to know her, to learn at the feet of her joy. Let me see you. Let me see inside life, inside your veins, inside my breath. Inside is where the wild people sing first, down deep into the lingering night thrall. Throat singing is the first utterance, still pulsing through time. Hermits line the corridors, heads bent. Saffron and gold are the mystic's robes. It is old in these parts, within internal intestinal systems of mystery. Possession. What possesses a woman to turn beads on a string, and what happens when the planet runs out of metal for the king? Do we know how to save ourselves from ourselves, or are we busy living and acquiring joy? We love buying abundance. Corporate manifestos uphold the hierarchies. It's basically the patriarchy, and they covet the patron's trophy. What are we saying if we don't say no to what our mothers choked on, left their dignity behind on? I put on a shirt today and it was blue. What if it was my loose mood? Would I choose a different color to hang on my shoulders? Do we mask our lives with petroleum and its many uses? What does depression look like on a daily basis? This is offensive. What do we call rapists who walk freely while Planned Parenthood can't hold their doors open freely for the women who need them? Don't drink from our cup. Don't stuff us full of your holiness and call us blessed. We will carry what we need to carry, no more, no less, no more. There's a shadow behind us, stalking, lurking, hiding, a cold hungering. Embrace it and move on. Pull it in and show it how to coexist peacefully. Bill. One day the scales fell and I could see the god of religion coming out of the woodwork, boasting about heaven and everything it takes to get in. And my jaw tightened because I knew they didn't mean to take me with them. People getting older, not wiser in years, complacent living catching up to them, got them walled up in fear. I couldn't fathom finding myself at the bottom of that ocean. I couldn't drown in time, couldn't sacrifice the labors of my love to the vine. To the status quo, here's the real flow, breaking it open. There was a time of simple living, when trees looked like the giants among us. Who invented the flying machines? The ones with dreams of better things. But we need the forests and the fields still. Do we know who's footing that bill?
Yeah, so like you really realize, and I think like you probably have felt this too, like quitting and you go, oh my God, it's just me now. It's time to hustle. And I set up a blog and I knew I wanted to just share my experiences as I was, building the business, and I wanted to do some content marketing for my consulting company too. So I was writing about just like thought leadership stuff about communications and the community at large. And my eyes were just opening wider and wider and wider.
Yeah, you said something in that when you went to Kingston.
Yes.
It was a city, but it felt like a small town. And at that point, it sounded like you didn't like that much. But then you come to a small town, so.
Well, Wellesley, so first we moved to Waterloo, my ex-husband and I. He had grown up in Waterloo.
Okay.
And then we moved effectively with Sun Life because his team was moving out of the downtown core. So he had the option to either go north to the North York office or Waterloo. And I could work at any of the offices. So we said, you know what, housing, living in Toronto is expensive. We've got this like option. Let's move out to Waterloo. His dad was here. Felt like a good place to kind of start settling down. And we really enjoyed Waterloo. I love the community. And then we saw housing development come up about a year and a half, I think, into living in Waterloo and in Wellesley.
Okay.
And it was almost like too good to be true. I'm like, these prices are incredible. Like you can get like a massive house for like the price of a condo in Toronto. And like, I was just in my head, I was like crunching the math and the value. And I was like, this is an amazing opportunity. And then we got to know Wellesley, and its like nickname is the friendliest little village. And it truly is. Like everybody was so nice, and like I never felt like uncomfortable or weird. We kind of bumped into a little bit of like some backwards thinking here and there, or somebody who may not like understand the right like term to use for something, but it was so minimal, like nothing compared to the vibe that I got in Kingston. Kingston was so much more segregated, even at Queens, and that's what I didn't like. Like the brown people were with the brown people, the black people were with the black, like it was just very, very like cliquey like that. And I didn't have an awesome friend group at the time. Like some of the ladies that I was, friends with were nice, and some were like really, really like judgy and very religious. And it was just, I was like, I don't fit in there. I found Wellesley, fell in love with it, and it had everything. Like it had the right amount of like amenities, and the school was awesome, and there was a little learning center around the corner from our house, so we could see ourselves, having the kids, having them grow up in that kind of environment. And we did, like, for the longest time. So Stephen and I, we split up after having the kids. It was about a year and a bit, like it wasn't long.
Okay.
They were still pretty young, but we both stayed in Wellesley because we wanted to just keep that going, and we were still on very good terms at the time. So that was pretty awesome. And I kept our big house. I was consulting at the time, so it was possible, and just kind of tried to do my best. So that blog that I was talking about, and so when I started the consultancy, started that blog, and started getting out to events and volunteering and really understanding the community more, I realized like how much of a like bubble you are in when you are heads down working in a corporate career in the city. And all of a sudden I was just seeing what else was happening, and that there was this huge momentum building around arts and culture and tech, and I was getting to meet people and just contribute my time to that. And then I wrote about that stuff, posted on my blog. That was, starting to get a little bit of profile. And then I also started posting poetry. So that's where I was like, you know what, I've just always had this like itch to do it, and I feel like I can, or there's something in me that's saying, just try. So started sharing there, and then I would just post stuff to Facebook too, and friends and family would like be very encouraging. And then, but it kept building momentum and kept building momentum. Poetry was kind of building off to the side, but I wasn't looking at it in a serious way at all. I was just, doing it as an outlet, and it helped me process a lot of the stuff that I had been going through, like the breakup with their dad and so on, and helped me sort of start to find myself a little bit more and find my voice, because I had really like suppressed like I think so much for so long and didn't even know it. So yeah, there's just a ton happening at that time, I would say, psychologically, spiritually, like with the family, and it was all converging and starting to come out in artistic expression.
I have so much of myself to reclaim, to pull back to the core of me. So much more loosening and cutting loose of heartstrings and leftover hanging things. Pass me the scissors, I'm about to go in. There are whole bodies hidden in these walls. There are stories I walled over with the loudest looking plaster. Cardboard and patterned paper. Of course, time and place started falling out. stepping out from the frames of yesterfears. They say dark matter is the heaviness of the chaos, held in small seeming nuggets of cosmos. And I would argue it can be equally as heavy to carry the light.
About a year and a half into working with Manulife on a consulting basis, like at that point I really was getting to the point of burnout, and I just been working very long hours for several years, and the poetry stuff, like people were starting to say, hey, you know, have you thought about publishing a book? We really like your stuff. And so I started thinking about that seriously. So in 2017, I just had this very strong feeling, almost like I could hear it in my ears. Like it sounds very like woo-woo, but it was for real. It just, one morning, this voice just said, sell your house, do it now. You're going to go on this like journey. I wound down the consulting. I sold the big house, moved across the street to the tiniest house on the street. And basically I was like, okay, I'm just going to commit myself to this work right now and we'll see where it goes. And then at the same time I met Patrick, my husband now, and he has 2 older girls. And I had this tiny house all of a sudden. It was a span of like 2 weeks. If I had hung on to that house for 2 more weeks, we would have had like all the space for everybody. So yeah, sold the big house. Patrick and the girls eventually moved in. We were basically like on top of each other for a year. And we're like, we can't do this anymore. We thought about like putting some extra bedrooms in the basement, but the basement wasn't like configured in a great way. So sell and let's see if we can find something with enough space for all of us that is reasonable. Buying into Wellesley at that point, like the housing market was starting to like go crazy. I was like, we can't even buy back in here. Like it's nuts. And the community at that point was changing a little bit too, and I could feel it. And I was like, you know what, I really am craving space and quiet, and I realized at that point how much time I need alone to process, meditate, and that is my process now for creating. Like I have to have a lot of time on my own, like in the mornings. I'm usually out here, that's my little meditation spot. Yeah, just kind of empty.
As these little towns build up, it's a lot harder to find a space to empty.
It is.
I am. How do we gauge what it means to be civilized? What system exists that has ever found the truth? And how does time pass on the moon? These are the question keys for unlocking the matrix. We are all radiant if we could see it. We are all from the first of firsts, fractaling out, crossing space-time in our expansion, vibing to the cosmic beat.
I've like prioritized poetry, so I published my first collection in 2017. It was very like faith-based though at the time, because that's where I was at. My family had grown up in the church, and I had kind of come and gone from, you know, being involved in the church, and then after I published that book, I went on this whole other like spiritual journey and deconstructed a lot of things, and went through a lot of like deconditioning of toxic everything. I looked at everything that was going on in the church, everything that was going on in the world at the same time, and I'm like, there's no harmony here.
Which church? Catholic or?
My dad's family was Roman Catholic, but we were raised we're so like Baptist, like evangelical Christian. So okay. Very strict. You don't dance, you don't listen to music. It takes a lot to pull away, because there's like, once you are in an organization like that, a community like that, there's lots of beautiful things, and then there's a lot of like dogma and very like insular, I don't know how to, like, you know probably exactly what I'm talking about, like, yeah, archaic ideas and very black and white thoughts around, you know, scripture and And even though if you actually talk to a lot of progressive theologians, they dissect scripture in such a different way, and they understand the historical context and the fact that there's so many different sources, there's things that are problematic, there's things that were just historically specific and, you know, right for that place and time maybe, or maybe not even right for that place and time, but it was captured in scripture. So yeah, it has definitely been a little mini journey within all the other journeys of like trying to detangle from that and understand like my own connection to source and how I build that relationship. What does that entail? Turning everything that I was taught on its head or on its side and re-examining it, figuring out what little things might have been true or made sense and could be, you know, helpful to carry forward, and what things are just like the chaff that needs to go into the wind, basically. Yeah, that factors into a lot of my art and poetry nowadays too, because I'm taking things that I was taught before and imagining them in a different way and trying to help others see that there's some good, there's glimmers of truth, but you really need to go like inside and do the internal work to truly understand what that connection is. And there's so much more freedom outside of the church construct, actually. So yeah, the first book of poetry, if you read it, like the introduction is very like evangelical. But I was trying to say, you know, I've been through all this stuff. I looked successful on the surface, but I always had these internal churnings, and like, mental health was always an issue too. So I still go through anxiety and depression and eating disorders as well. That was something I struggled with a lot in my late teens, early 20s. So I was trying to put it all down to say, you know, can somebody else learn something from this, and how do we look at faith differently too, if that's helpful for other people. And then I wrote the book and then went on this like completely different like spiritual track, and my second book, Art of the Unknown, is so much more about the universe and the chaos of the universe, and that even though it's chaotic, there is purpose, there is love within that, there is connection, and it is naturally more inclusive than what we define it to be. So I tried to actually incorporate different pronouns and like break apart or challenge the notion of the creator being like a he. Yeah, just took that kind of head on. And some people are like, we don't know what you mean here. And I'm like, I know you don't, but you're going to have to go and Google it and figure it out.
In that, did you find that people were willing to take that journey with you?
Yeah, I found more people were interested in that than the straight up traditional view of faith, because so many people have been hurt by that, the traditional religious approach, and have been burned by it, stung by it, felt, you know, excluded by it, or physically harmed through it. And yeah, like I can't even stomach the idea of going back into like a church setting. Like it feels very, very triggering now to me. Like ever since like everything that we've learned about residential schools and the harm that the Indigenous people have suffered, like it literally, like my dad even, who is very like black and white, very traditional, like I've seen a shift in his mindset too, away from all of that, and it just breaks his heart that like this has happened, and it's at the hands of a church that is not even really apologetic. The Pope interaction, there was no apology, I don't think. It was like a very like, oh, that's unfortunate. Like, and then the amount of control and power and the politics influenced by the church, we could talk for days and days and days about that, and the patriarchy and colonialism. And there are so many more people now thinking about these things, and you can see that there is a movement sort of afoot and this like rising awareness. There's more talk of decolonizing and what that means and what the work looks like on an individual and personal level. And it's really important work, and yet there's so much more to do to help people understand what that is and bring that into the mainstream, because it's still, I think, very fringe. And
so there's two movements. There's one that's embracing all kinds of change and newer things and newer thinking. Well, some of it's old thinking that's finally hitting this area too.
Yes.
But there's also these people that are digging in their heels and saying, no, you can't change our way of thinking.
Yeah, or they have just that like very Pollyanna view of what Canada is and what Canada stands for and what the flag stands for, and they're like, this is our, like, we're so proud, we've always been multicultural and like inclusive and friendly. And we're like, really? Like on the surface, you know, it seems very touristy, like it draws different people to it, but yet still so segregated.
Where do we go when no wanderer is safe these days? Bombs are traded after the lights go out, and we have no more ways to save ourselves. Blood in the soil needs to be burned. The hands of the congregation and its twisted father-founded bodies need to be bound. What else is worth tossing into the eternal pit? This isn't the morning star, the beautiful light-bearer star of death. This isn't Shiva the destroyer. This isn't the other to blame. This is the sacred Mother of Earth, showing us the wounds left to pay. This is the eternal void slipping the hangman's hooded sack over the ones it chooses to take, for crimes too late to pay for. Loose and pathetic the hoods hang, gray faces and sunken eyes bear the dread of being out for the unforgivable. Betrayal of the whole.
I feel like I was like almost like the ugly duckling, but not like visual, not aesthetically, like just more a late bloomer, because I was always trying to people please, and I think that superseded my voice a lot of the time. And then I started to basically stand up for my own interests more.
That comment right in there about people pleasing and that kind of overpowering having your own voice is interesting. It's like, because I think a lot of people do that. Then they end up in that losing a piece of themselves. So your art, we've been talking about your poetry.
Yes.
Your other art, there's all sorts of mediums used, right? So how did that develop? Were you always someone who wanted to doodle when you were a kid, and then it just came out of that?
Basically, yes. My grandfather taught me how to paint when I was like very little. So he would always be painting, doing different things. He really liked calligraphy. So he taught me some basic painting stuff. But I have such a like clear memory of it. I love my grandfather. He died when I was very little though. Like I was like 4 at the time. But yeah, I feel like he's always sort of been with me too in spirit. Like we were very closely connected that way. And his background was interesting too, because he was Tibetan, but adopted by an Irish missionary family. So his family name was Jones, and my mom's last name was Jones. My dad's last name was James, and totally not what you would expect from people coming from like that part of the world. But that was just the influence of the church on our family. But I've always been so curious about that lineage because, one, it's mysterious. Like, I don't know. It's really hard to track beyond, when my grandfather was adopted, and record keeping back then was, like, not anything going on system-wise. So, yeah, it's just more wondering about and then trying to learn and research, what did that culture entail? Like, and what does it entail? And I feel very, very connected to it. And Mongolia comes up a lot too in my research, and all roads sort of like in my family tree lead back to northern China, which is very interesting. So that's been coming out in my art quite a bit more too. But yeah, my grandfather sort of taught me, and then I just was like always making something, always creating something, always doodling or figuring out a way to like make something out of something. sounds like very generic, but I was never formally taught. So that was also something that felt like a bit of a limitation for me, and that I could never really, for the longest time, I couldn't overcome in my mind. I'm obsessed with trees. I always have been. I feel the tree energy very, very keenly, and I've been doing a lot more research about how trees communicate and the system and network of communication that is in collaboration with like the fungal network. It's fascinating. So I do find these like subjects, and I will deep dive and spend hours just like reading through stuff online.
On the fungal network, I was just last week watching YouTube videos about the fungal network under forests in Oregon. The largest life form on Earth is there, and it's like
it just gives you
huge.
shivers. Like Patrick and I are very, very eclectic in our thinking, and I love it. Like it feeds everything that we do and who we are. Like we spend a lot of time in the summer, especially like wee hours of the morning. We'll be out here on the gravity chairs, just like staring up and looking for like shooting stars and just wondering about like, okay, there's that formation, but then you can see something just beyond it, and we've been itching to get a telescope for that purpose, just to kind of explore different like objects out there. Yeah. Mushrooms are very, very fascinating too, in terms of like what they offer health-wise, neurally too. So like restorative in many ways. And then psilocybin is like making a huge like breakthrough in like mental health and for therapeutic uses and just for fun. But yeah.
I've been over the last year or two going on some pretty interesting trips using it. But a lot of it does balance me out for a long time after, as far as depression and things like that go. Very interesting stuff.
I love all of that. Anything that kind of challenges the norm right now, or that needs to be, what's the word, normalized, because it's actually healthy. It's been like stigmatized for so long because of different controlling factors. Weed is high on my list.
Yeah.
No pun intended. Like basically I smoke weed pretty much like all day, every day, and it just keeps me steady.
Yeah, weed, I'd be one of those people that wouldn't get what everyone else was getting out of it.
This is a thing. So now that it's a little, I am of two minds about regulation. So we'll just park that for a second. But the fact that more people are getting into growing and understanding it from a scientific perspective and really seeing like what the components are and what does what. Like back when we were young and smoking weed, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
What was in there? And like, was it a sativa or an indica, and what kind of terpene, and who knows, right?
Yeah.
Like,
That's true too. Like, I mean, for any unregulated drugs right now, it can be scary. Not knowing what is in there.
How you can figure out, okay, what's going to produce what effect, and how to manage it, and then pick the right thing for you. I think it's easier now.
Yeah, and it's pretty much like you're ordering from catalogs, and you can read about what you're gonna get.
It's crazy. So, you go into like, it's like a fast food joint, basically. You go in, you're like, okay, I'll take a bit of that.
Yeah.
We actually really like True North in Listowel.
True North?
Place, yeah.
That's the new one up Wallace North.
Yeah, I find that one is a little more, like, it's very down to earth. We've looked at some of the other ones, and it just has like the right vibe and the right mix of things. I'm trying hard to normalize. Like, I still haven't got to the point where I tell my parents about it. Yeah. Although my dad I think he's pretty much on to me. The kids know, because it got to a point where it's like a year ago where I just felt like I was hiding stuff that actually didn't need to be hidden, and it didn't feel honest. And so I did a bunch of research and looked up like parenting guidance for how do you have these conversations, and what do you say, and how do you approach it, and everything pointed to it's better to talk about it and deconstruct any stereotypical notion around it so that they just understand the facts, and it's less likely that they'll use it for the wrong reasons, and then it actually highlights the benefits of it and the health wellness components of it, and you can use it in a constructive way. And the more that I've been seeing online, even on Instagram, there's lots of accounts that are really trying to normalize it, because it traces back to like ancient traditions, and it's like an ancient medicine plant. Like there's so much that's been lost knowledge-wise because of colonialism, basically.
An interesting thing, and I was hoping that legalization would do this before 2019, really. When you talked about marijuana or weed, whatever, it was always giggly people going, oh, dude, making these jokes and stuff. But now it is much more normalized, and it's just a normal part of conversations. And I like that, where it's not some weird
taboo thing that you
or
can
some frat boy joke
yes
anymore.
That's a big thing too, actually. The number of women having the conversations around like the benefits of cannabis and how to integrate it into like your rituals and your wellness routines. It's amazing to me, and I love it. Like, I'm here for all of that. Like, how do I contribute? I just have to get brave enough to publicly like call it out. And it's still a thing. Like, I fully acknowledge, like, I still have that little bit of a hesitation.
Wildly woman creator. Far beyond the superficial holiness of idle white men running church as business. They wanted to tell you how to be. Kindly, of course. Well-meaning and full of Jesus. They wanted you to play the part of shame personified. To carry your cross always. To not forget it at home so that you would look properly penitent for all the things you weren't supposed to do or supposed to be.
Oh, something I should mention from my dad's side of the family, because it's going to come out in my art, and I'm hoping to do like a big installation at some point. It's just going to be a very big lift, so I have to like gear up for it. And it might be political, but my dad's eldest sister was a nun in Burma. She left the family when she was pretty young. I guess my dad's family, there's a lot of like, I think there's like abuse and just like a lot of mental illness happening in the family. Apparently my grandmother was very depressed and very like aggressive, and my dad was one of the older ones, so he helped to take care of all the younger ones that came along. My dad's sister, my aunt, he was really close to her, but she went to a convent, I think just to escape. And then when I was 5, she came to visit us here in Canada, and she was a beautiful person. I'm named after her, my middle name, so her name is Sister Anne. Her middle name's Anne. She was going back to Burma, and she was on Air India Flight 182, which got bombed down in 1985. So I am only just now researching and understanding the historical context and the implications and the political implications of that. It was always more of like a family crisis, family tragedy, and I felt very connected to my grandfather who died the year before, and then this aunt who had this terrible thing happen. And starting to piece it together and go, oh my gosh. And then looking for information about it, I realized there have been public hearings up until this year even about this. And there was a whole beautiful report written about it, about how it affected all the families and what different people's perspectives were. And they published this. John C. Major, I think, was heading this up. Fairly old though. So I'm almost like, I need to connect with him before he dies. Not the most eloquent way of saying it, but like I'm like, time's of the essence. But I really want to understand like what's happening, and why did we not learn about this in school? Because that was a big thing that hit me, was none of this was taught as part of our history, and yet it was like the singular largest aviation terrorist event that had happened before 9/11. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, way to go, Canada. Like, we focus so much on U.S. politics. We co-opt a lot of that. We shoulder it. We honor it. And we don't do any of that for our own.
Yeah, and now I'm finding we've been doing that so long, we're emulating it.
Yes.
in really extreme ways right now.
Yeah.
It's scary how.
It is. The Roe versus Wade overturning of that is like, I almost don't have words for it. I'm still processing how to channel that rage, because it is, you just like vibrate from the like emotion around it.
With the way we're emulating, I'm sure that's going to splash up to here.
Come up north.
And there'll be pro-life groups up here that will feel empowered.
How do you unpack all of it, and where does anybody even start to address? Because it's all overlapping, intersectional, it's racism, the complete bigotry, like, backwards motion.
Would they rather be flying a Confederate flag?
Right. That's what it starts to feel like.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of, like, there's some symbolism that's evolving around the whole hockey stick flag thing. Like, you called it out in one of your articles. It's a thing. And you feel it. Like, it feels like an attack. It feels threatening. Just that. And then you think about everything that is underlying that particular statement, that they chose to do that. We are coexisting, we are neighbors, and this is happening. It's wild. Yeah.
It's
the flag and pool, the Confederate flag and pool, just ugh. Or like where it's like the Freedom Convoy, like the expressions of support for that, where there's like bales of hay and the spray paint on the side. Like there was one on the way to Stratford too.
Oh yeah, just outside of Stratford,
Yes.
There's that trailer with the.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Stratford because it doesn't feel like Perth County to me.
Yes.
It feels like you get taken away to some other artistic realm.
Progressive. But then there is around
right
it.
around it. It's like there's a ring you have to break through to get to the artistic wonderland.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Break through Gad's Hill.
Oh yeah.
Where are my angels at? Setting fire to the paintings of saints on crosses. Even when the soul goes through the desolation of itself, the purging, the burning, the sweeping away, the emptying. Ecstatic passion is love fuel for renewal. Creation and decomposition in equal rhythm. Harmonizing to the secret chord in the key of joy. Wildness drops us to our knees, teaches us the sacred discipline of letting go. But I had questions left to answer.
People don't come out and say, I'm 80 and I've been racist this long and it works for me.
Yeah.
But they do say that these things that people are complaining about have worked for them without saying, I'm racist.
They say it in other ways, right?
Yeah,
like they'll
exactly.
make statements and you're like, that tells me everything about your mindset.
A lot of councils, corporations have it. It's deeply ingrained in Canadian culture and politics.
And I'm just getting ready to start to interact more, figure out how to navigate all of that and what it's going to look like. Because there's so many things that, like the arts, inevitably when you're doing public art, you bump up against the politics around it and whether something's going to be too edgy, too extreme, and not in a bad way extreme, but like too progressive almost, or too challenging for the community, or there's people who might think it's too challenging for the community because it makes them feel uncomfortable. There's a lot of work to do and a lot more to do to support the arts and culture that is waning because of the pandemic. It's almost like people are thirsting for it, but there hasn't been in place like this cohesive structure to support all of it and keep it going in a sustainable way that is still independent and not, influenced by what the city might want or what other parties might want. People need arts and culture. I think we know that that was such a missing component. There's so much to give in this community, Like, it's the artists who will crystallize and express everything that we've been feeling. So it kind of gives words and helps people sift through and understand maybe their own situations better. And it's healing in that way.
Definitely.
There's like redemption or reclamation of whatever we've been through and turning it into something beautiful and then moving forward. And then you can like move on.
And that's going way back to the beginning. That's something that where I think STEAM
Yes.
is far better than STEM. Because there's a lot of people who do not embrace the importance of the arts in amongst that stuff and the artistic side of all the other of the sciences and technology. And
It's enmeshed. Like, how can you have engineering without design? Like, how you can't, or science without curiosity and that design thinking, or collaboration. Even it's almost like it's invisible as part of those processes, but it's the glue that holds it together. Actual bullshit. Sit.
well, don't eat my phone though.
No.
That's,
Oh, pause down because you've got big. No. Come here. Okay. Come on down. Here. Thank you. Good girl. That's better. That's better. That's better. All right. Come. Daisy down. Daisy down.
oh,
Sorry, Colin.
oh, it's okay.
Come here. Sit. What does that mean?
Yeah.
But she has to show everybody that she's being good. She's like, look, I did it. You did it. Yes, you did it. Okay. That is the only one downfall, is if the central back is going, this thing can flap.
That's not really conducive for meditation.
No.
Or
No.
I heard you saying back in like 2017 it was more faith-based.
Yes.
So pieces like this, would they have had any place in your art back then? The art in her studio was bursting with imagery of personal revolution, containing a landscape that looked more like a fist being raised as the earth rebels against humanity, de-alcoholized Molotov cocktails, and a piece that simply stated, defund the system. Or is that something that's...
Because, like, I feel like I was trying to deconstruct stuff at that time.
Okay.
Too, but I was still treading the line of it and not quite sure like how pushy to be or how like different or edgy, like how challenging basically to take things, and also learning how to do that because there's so much that goes on, like the internal script around will people understand, who's gonna like accept this, who's gonna get angry about this, who's gonna, call bullshit on this or whatever, and am I the right person to be saying this? Like, what if I put this out and nobody likes it, nobody responds? So I was going through all of that in around 2017ish, whereas now I'm like, basically just fuck everything, burn it all down, let's try again.
Even in my writing, I was being taught to, and I've met some other journalists who won't say it out loud, but they're moving away from being completely objective, because by being completely objective, you end up giving
too much airtime to maybe the wrong things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're realizing we're not objective.
Nobody's objective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And that's kind of what I hear from your time deconstructing in 2017 to where your art is at now, that you've taken similar steps and realizations that some stuff should just be burned down and fuck it.
Just burn it.
So,
That's very good.
and I know you're not only making art for Perth East, but do you find that there's
more interest or like understanding or acceptance in
Yeah.
the city? So it's interesting because I had a gallerist out yesterday from Toronto, and she even said, like, she's from the beaches, and like, I'm from Toronto, I understand like what the beaches are like. She's like, oh yeah, this is like really thoughtful and really like out there and progressive. She's like, I don't know if the people in the beaches of the lake understand. I'm like, are you kidding me? She's like, yeah, this is more like the west side. And I was like, okay, well, I also lived on the west side, so I get that. Like more like King and Niagara area, like before Liberty Village, so like downtown west side, like Queen West. I love Queen West. But I was surprised, very surprised. I guess the aesthetic might be getting closer to like European contemporary almost, because I feel like a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing here is abstract, but it's going more almost in a graphic design sort of pop culture way. But there are still some artists who are looking at things differently, but it still feels safe, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I don't want to be safe, because if you're going to do art, why are you trying to be safe doing it? Like, you're not going to achieve anything that way. Like, it'll be nice to look at, but like, I started out doing landscapes, like very serene, like simple scenes, and that I loved doing, and it allowed me to break into oil painting. But I find that I can't do those anymore because they make me angry. So I painted this. Somebody gave me this canvas because they didn't need it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to like a landscape. So I did the landscape, and I'm like, it's making me crazy because it feels too pleasant. And then I was like, I'm gonna take my knife to it, like my palette knife to it, and I just started etching, and then this thing emerged, and I'm like, that feels better. That feels better, 100%.
That's interesting because it's got kind of a fist in your ear, or fist in the air.
Fist in the ear too. It's necessary.
But that photo I took, you're smiling like you're closing. It's like mixed messages there, but it's
well, it's like,
or maybe not.
Maybe it's just a different way of doing activism.
Yeah,
right?
Or you're smiling because you're free now to do activism in your work.
It's unedited, it's unfiltered. I'm not worried about, am I pleasing somebody with this? Because my art, if it doesn't sell, it doesn't sell, and I don't care. It's about, am I getting a message across? And are people provoked to think about something, whether they hate it or they love it? They're going to take it away in some way, shape, or form, and that seed will turn into something. Hopefully it's not hate. Hopefully it is, we need to think differently, basically, about everything. Woodstein, we're down for that.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Roshan for the interview. Check the description wherever you are listening to this for links for more information, or visit Wood-stein.ca. That's WOOD-STEIN.ca. You can support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Colin Burrows. Like, share, comment, follow, and support Woodstein Media and this podcast, and have a wonderful day. Go support some artists in your neighborhood.